The polar night-shrouded station, North 16, in impenetrable darkness. Only the stars, unnaturally bright in the Arctic sky, and rare lights flickering in the windows of individual buildings broke the absolute blackness. Streltsov walked ahead, forging a path through the deep snow. Behind him came Vera, Klimov, and Solovyeva, weakened, chilled, but firmly determined to complete this mission. Or at least to survive. "Strange that the electricity is working," Vera remarked, nodding toward the illuminated windows of the main building. "If everyone disappeared—" "Diesel generators," Klimov replied. "Automatic. They can run for weeks without supervision." They approached the perimeter of the station, an ordinary chain-link fence, covered with frost and half-buried in snow. The gate was open, a bad sign. In the Arctic, no one leaves gates open. It's the first rule of survival. "Stay alert," Streltsov warned, drawing his pistol. Someone or something might have remained. Without their supernatural companions, they felt defenseless. The medallions, which had disappeared during the strange transition through the void, were not just sources of power. They had become part of themselves, a familiar weight on their chests, a sense of constant presence nearby. The all-seeing eye, protective amulets issued by Derzhavin, had survived, but their effectiveness without the medallions was questionable. The station grounds consisted of several buildings arranged around a central area. The main building, a 3-story concrete structure with antennas on the roof. Nearby, warehouses, a generator room, garages for snowmobiles. Further away, residential buildings, a small cafeteria, a medical station. "Let's start with the main one," Streltsov decided. "There should be communications, documents, maybe records of what happened here." They cautiously approached the doors of the building. Unlocked, another alarming sign. In the harsh conditions of the far north, even a minute's disruption of the thermal regime could lead to frozen pipes, equipment failure, death. Inside it was warm, the heating system was working, the lights were on in the corridors. Everything looked normal, except for one detail, not a soul around. "Like in Karelia," Solovyeva said quietly, as if everyone just vanished into thin air. "Let's check the offices," Klimov ordered. "Look for any records of strange activity, unusual phenomena, especially in the last days before losing contact." They split up, methodically searching the first floor. Streltsov came across the communications center. Radio stations, satellite phones, computers. Everything was working, but there was no connection. Only white noise in the headphones and blank monitor screens. Vera found the archive with station documentation, scientific reports, observation logs, personnel files. She quickly scanned through folders, looking for mentions of Igor's grandfather or the Eye of the Abyss. Solovyeva discovered the dining room, untouched plates with food, cold tea, and mugs, as if people had gotten up from the table, stepped out for a minute, but never returned. Klimov investigated the station chief's office. The safe was open, folders marked "Top Secret" scattered across the desk. On the wall, a map of the archipelago with marked points of strange activity. "Igor!" Vera called from the archive. "Found something!" Streltsov quickly hurried down the corridor. Vera was holding an old yellowed folder with a faded special secrecy. "Store indefinitely" stamp. "Your grandfather's file," she said, handing him the folder. "And something else." She pointed to a shelving unit that had been moved aside, revealing the entrance to a small, hidden room. Inside, a simple metal table, and on it, a journal in a leather binding with the initials VPS. "Vasily Petrovich Streltsov," Igor whispered, carefully taking the journal. "How did you find it?" "By accident," Vera admitted. "I caught on something under the shelf, pulled, and it moved aside. It seems few people knew about this hiding place." They left the archive and called the others. Klimov and Solovyeva joined them in a small break room that had a table and several chairs. "Report," the major commanded. "What did you find?" "Streltsov's grandfather's personal file," Vera answered, "and his journal, hidden in a secret compartment." I discovered the station chief's last records, said Klimov, placing several sheets on the table. Written the day before contact was lost. He mentions strange activity under the ice and intensifying signals from the depths. And in the dining room, Solovyeva added, everything looks as if people disappeared right during dinner. Plates with untouched food, chairs pushed back. Creepy. Also found this. Vera placed an old framed photograph on the table. It showed a group of people in winter gear against the background of the station's main building. In the center stood a young NKVD officer, whom Streltsov immediately recognized as his grandfather. Taken in 1938, judging by the date on the back, the day before the expedition disappeared. Igor examined the photograph carefully. His grandfather looked tense but determined. Around his neck, a clearly visible shadow medallion. Standing nearby were other expedition members, scientists, military personnel, technical staff, 12 people in total. And they all vanished without a trace. We need to study the documents, said Streltsov, opening his grandfather's journal. Maybe we'll find the key to understanding what's happening now. He began to read, while the others worked on other documents. Vasily Petrovich's entries continued those that Igor had already seen in the folder given by Derzhavin. April 19, 1938. Only Nestorov and I remain. The others have either died or transformed. I saw how Kovalev changed. His skin became transparent, his eyes glowed from within, his limbs elongated. He could still speak, but no longer in a human way. He said that they would soon come, and that we should prepare to meet them. April 20th, 1938. Nestorov is dead. He tried to destroy the eye, but the artifact defended itself. The entire room was covered in blood. I am alone now. Shadow advises me to flee, but where to? Outside is a blizzard, and in the blizzard, figures are moving, not human ones. Each night they come closer to the station. I hear their voices in my head. They promise power, knowledge, immortality. They offer to make me their bridge into this world. April 21st, 1938. I've made my decision. I will use the eye not to close the portal, but to redirect it. Shadow says it's dangerous, that I might end up on the other side. But if this saves the world from invasion, the price is acceptable. I've prepared the ritual, written a letter to my wife and children, though I know they will never receive it. The committee will conceal everything, create a legend. But perhaps someday the truth will be known. And if someone finds these records, know that I do this voluntarily, aware of the risk. Too much is at stake. April 22nd, 1938. Tonight, at midnight, when the boundary between worlds is thinnest. The eye is activated, awaiting the final command. I have added some of my blood to it. Shadow says this will strengthen the connection, allow me to control the process from within. I don't know what awaits me on the other side. I only hope that I can hold back the ancients long enough for humanity to prepare, because they will come anyway, sooner or later. The convergence of spheres is inevitable. The question is only whether we will be ready. The entries ended there. The last pages had been torn out. Streltsov closed the journal, feeling a strange mixture of pride in his grandfather and concern for his fate. Vasily Petrovich had consciously taken a risk, possibly sacrificed himself, to delay the invasion of the ancients. "What's in the personal file?" Igor asked Vera, who was studying the official documents. "Standard biography, service record, character assessments," she replied. "But there's one oddity. Look." She pointed to a sheet with medical data. "It says your grandfather had a rare blood type, very rare, with unusual markers that the medics couldn't identify. And what does that mean?" "I don't know," Vera frowned. "But he writes in his journal that he added his blood to the Eye of the Abyss, and that this is somehow connected to control over the artifact." "The last chance is in my blood, in my offspring," Streltsov quoted. Now I understand what he meant. My blood. I have the same blood type as my grandfather, a genetic connection. "That's exactly why Derzhavin sent you specifically," Vera nodded. He knew that only a Streltsov could activate the eye. Or deactivate it, Klimov grimly added, studying the station chief's notes. According to these notes, the artifact is active again, and this began about a week ago. What specifically began? Asked Solovyeva. Strange instrument readings, changes in ice structure, acoustic anomalies, the major listed. Everything indicates that somewhere deep under the ice, an awakening is occurring, and it's connected to the eye. Wait, Streltsov raised his hand. If my grandfather used the artifact to redirect the portal, there must be some specific place where this happened. Where is the eye now? They exchanged glances. Indeed, the documents mention the artifact, but not its exact location. There must be a bunker, Vera suggested, deep beneath the station. Your grandfather's journal mentions that he prepared the ritual here, at North 16. Let's check the basements, Klimov decided. There should be an entrance. They stood up and headed for the exit. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out. For a moment the station was plunged into darkness, then emergency lighting, dim and reddish, automatically came on. The generators? Solovyeva asked anxiously. Possibly a malfunction, Klimov replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Or, he didn't finish. From the corridor came a strange sound, as if something heavy were being dragged across the floor. Then footsteps were heard, slow, uneven with a characteristic slapping sound. Weapons ready, Streltsov whispered, drawing his pistol. Stay together. They formed a combat formation, back to back, weapons pointed in different directions. The footsteps were approaching. Now another sound was added, a wet squelching, as if wet clothing were rubbing against the walls. A figure appeared from the darkness of the corridor. In the dim red light of the emergency lamps, it looked like a person in a wet polar explorer's jumpsuit. But something was wrong with its movements, too jerky, unnatural, as if the body didn't fully obey control. Halt! Klimov barked. KGB! The figure froze, swaying slightly. Then it slowly raised its head, and they saw the face, or what had once been a face. The skin had taken on a grayish tint and a strange texture resembling fish scales. The eyes, large, protruding, with vertical pupils, emitting a dim greenish light. Help! Me! The creature rasped in a voice that still had human notes. There, inside, me. Who are you? Asked Streltsov, keeping his pistol ready. Identify yourself. Petrandre, station, technician. Each word was difficult for the creature. They came from under the ice. Everyone changed. I'm the last. Where are the others? Klimov demanded. The other station personnel? Down there, below, with them. The creature took another step forward, and they saw that its hands were no longer human, elongated fingers with webbing covered with the same scaly skin. Run while you can. What happened? Vera tried to speak calmly, despite the horror of the situation. How did this start? The eye activated itself. The creature trembled, as if resisting something inside itself. Signals from the depths they control, can't resist. Suddenly Petrov's body bent at an unnatural angle. An inhuman cry burst from his mouth. His eyes flashed brighter, and his skin began to change even more rapidly. Patches of scales spreading across his face, neck, arms. Resistance is futile. The voice changed, becoming deeper, with vibrating overtones. Convergence has begun. Petrov's body lunged forward, throwing itself at the group of operatives with incredible speed. Shots rang out. All four reacted simultaneously, channeling years of training into their trigger fingers. The creature was thrown back, but it didn't fall. The silver bullets, intended for supernatural entities, made neat holes in its body, but instead of blood, a thick greenish liquid oozed from them, and it kept moving. Retreat! Klimov commanded. To the exit! They began to back away, continuing to fire. The creature followed them, its movements becoming more fluid, coordinated, as if something inside was trying to control the captured body. It's no longer human, Vera shouted. Aim for the head! Streltsov redirected his fire. A hit to the skull finally stopped the pursuer. The creature collapsed to the floor, the greenish fluid spreading in a puddle. But even after this, the body continued to twitch, as if some transformation was taking place inside it. Faster! Igor pushed the others toward the exit. Outside! They ran out of the building into the frosty air. The polar night enveloped the station, but now in some windows was visible not the usual electric lighting, but the same greenish glow that had emanated from the creature's eyes. "There are others," Solovyeva whispered. "We're surrounded." "We need to find the eye," Streltsov said resolutely, "and the bunker where it's kept. This might be our only chance." "But how?" asked Klimov. "We don't even know where to look for the entrance." "We do," Vera suddenly said. "In your grandfather's journal, Igor. He mentioned that the ritual would be performed at midnight, when the boundary between worlds is thinnest. In occult traditions, this means the place must be special, where worlds literally touch." "The North Pole," Streltsov nodded, understanding her thought. "Or near it, the place where sky meets earth." "Exactly." Vera pointed to the most distant structure of the complex. "Look, that's a meteorological tower, the northernmost point of the station." And there, they peered into the distance. At the base of the tower, a metal door glowed dimly, not an ordinary entrance, but clearly armored, with a code lock and symbols etched on the surface. Symbols similar to those they had seen on the object in Karelia. "The bunker," Klimov exhaled. "That's where the eye must be." "And that's also where the rest of the station staff is," Solovyeva grimly added, "or what's left of them." "We have no choice." Streltsov checked his pistol, chambering a new round. "We must finish what my grandfather started." "Igor," Vera placed her hand on his shoulder, "this could be a trap. Everything we know about the eye indicates its danger. It doesn't close portals, it transforms people, makes them conduits for the ancients." "I know," he nodded, "but my grandfather found a way to use it differently, for redirection, and if my blood truly is the key to controlling the artifact, I have to try." They looked into each other's eyes for several seconds, understanding that not only their fate was being decided, but possibly the fate of all humanity. "All right," Vera finally said, "we go together, to the end." Klimov and Solovyeva silently nodded, joining this unspoken agreement. The four operatives, left without their supernatural companions, having lost Grigoriev, exhausted by the strange transition through the void, but still ready to fight, slowly moved across the snow-covered area of the station toward the distant meteorological tower, toward the bunker where, possibly, the Eye of the Abyss awaited, an artifact capable of either saving the world or destroying it, toward the decisive battle with the ancients, beginning at the edge of the world, in the endless ice of the Arctic. As they approached the meteorological tower, they noticed that the snow around it had a strange tint, as if illuminated from within by a dim, greenish glow, and the metal structure itself was covered with frost that formed into bizarre patterns, resembling the same symbols that were etched on the bunker door. "They're everywhere," Solovyeva whispered. "These symbols, as if someone is marking territory." "Or writing a spell," Klimov grimly added, "changing the very reality around us." Streltsov approached the bunker door. A massive metal plate with a code lock in the middle and a round wheel, like on submarines. But the main elements were the symbols etched on the surface, the same strange hieroglyphs they had seen on the object in Karelia. The writing of the ancients. "How do we get in?" asked Klimov. "We need an access code." Igor thought, recalling his grandfather's notes. What could be the key? A date? Coordinates? A personal number? Suddenly it dawned on him. "Blood," he said. "My blood is the key." He took out a knife, made a small cut on his palm, and pressed his bloodied hand to the center of the door, where the main lines of symbols converged. The reaction was instantaneous. The symbols on the door lit up, not with the greenish light of the ancients, but with a deep red, as if absorbing Streltsov's blood. The lock clicked, the wheel began to turn slowly by itself. The door opened with a creak, revealing a dark passage leading downward. "It worked," Vera exhaled. "Your blood really is the key." "Let's go." Streltsov took out his flashlight. "And be ready for anything." They began their descent down a narrow metal staircase. The steps creaked under their weight, as if they hadn't been used for many years. The air grew colder and damper as they went deeper below the surface. Having descended about 20 meters, they found themselves in a small technical room with another door, this time an ordinary one, with a sign reading Special Research Laboratory, Access Form 3A. Behind this door was a long corridor with several doors on both sides. The rooms beyond turned out to be ordinary laboratories, tables with instruments, computers, shelves with samples. "Look," Solovyeva pointed to one of the monitors. "It's working." The screen displayed various graphs, numbers, diagrams, and in the corner of the display was a message: Object activity, 87%. Time to full activation, 17:43:12. The numbers relentlessly counting down seconds. "A little more than 17 hours, Klimov calculated. "Until what?" "Until the convergence," Vera answered quietly. "Until the moment when the eye fully activates, and the boundary between worlds thins enough for the ancients to cross." "But it's months until April," Solovyeva objected. "According to Derzhavin's calculations, the convergence should happen on April 17th. "Apparently, they've accelerated the process," Streltsov said grimly, "or our calculations were wrong." They continued moving down the corridor, checking each room. All the laboratories were empty, but some bore signs of hasty flight: overturned chairs, scattered papers, abandoned personal belongings. At the end of the corridor was another door, massive, steel, with a signal lamp above it. The lamp glowed red, indicating strict isolation mode. "Storage," Klimov suggested. "The artifact must be there." Streltsov again used his blood, pressing his palm to the scanner by the door. The signal lamp flashed and changed color to green. The locks clicked, and the door slowly opened. Beyond it was a spacious hall with a high ceiling. In its center stood a strange construction, a circular platform about 5 meters in diameter, raised half a meter above the floor. Around it were computers, instrument racks, monitors, and on the platform itself, in the center, was the object they had been searching for so long. The Eye of the Abyss. Unlike other artifacts they had encountered, this one looked simple and almost ordinary. A sphere the size of a soccer ball, made of some dark material resembling obsidian. Its surface was smooth, shiny, and seemed to absorb the light around it, creating a barely noticeable aura of distortion. But the strangest thing was that the sphere levitated in the air, slowly rotating around its axis, not touching the platform. And across its surface ran thin lines, the same symbols that were on the bunker door, but glowing blood red. "It's active," Vera whispered, looking at the artifact. "And it's not the only thing." Klimov pointed to the far end of the hall, separated by a transparent partition of thick glass or plastic. Behind the partition were people, or rather, beings that had once been people. A dozen figures in Polar Explorers' jumpsuits, but changed, like Petrov, whom they had met upstairs. Scaly skin, elongated limbs, eyes with vertical pupils. Some had changed more. They already had fins growing on their backs, gills on their necks, webbing between fingers. They stood motionless, staring at the artifact, and from their lips came strange sounds. Not speech, but not groans or cries either. Rather, it resembled chanting, rhythmic and monotonous, in a language that should not be pronounced by human vocal cords. "Station personnel," Solovyeva said quietly. "All of them changed." "But why are they behind glass?" asked Streltsov. "Who locked them there?" "Perhaps themselves," Klimov suggested. While they were still human, they understood what was happening and isolated themselves to avoid infecting the others. But apparently it was already too late. "Look," Vera pointed to one of the monitors. "Here's surveillance camera footage." The screen displayed a recording dated a week earlier. In the frame was the same hall, the same platform with the eye, but the artifact wasn't active. It just lay on the platform, dark and motionless. Next to it stood 3 people in white lab coats, 2 men and a woman. They were discussing something, periodically glancing at the instruments. Suddenly the eye trembled. One of the scientists noticed the movement and pointed it out to the others. All 3 approached the platform, leaned over the artifact, and at that moment the sphere abruptly changed color, from black to blood red. A flash of light blinded the camera for a second, and when the image recovered, the 3 scientists were lying on the floor. They were writhing as if in pain, their bodies beginning to change, skin darkening, limbs elongating, strange slits resembling gills appearing on their necks. Vera turned off the recording. Everyone was silent, processing what they had seen. It activated itself, Klimov finally said, and began transforming people, turning them into something else. Into conduits, Streltsov nodded, as my grandfather wrote, bridges for the ancients into our world. But why now? Asked Solovyeva. The artifact has been stored here for decades. What changed? The convergence is approaching, Vera answered. The boundaries between worlds are thinning. The eye sensed this and activated itself, and the ancients began breaking through. Through the transformed people, Streltsov nodded. They use them as vessels, avatars in our world. But your grandfather, Vera turned to Igor, he managed to use the eye differently. Instead of becoming a conduit for the ancients, he himself crossed to the other side, and somehow locked them there. For 87 years. Klimov grimly added, and now the seal is weakening, they're returning. Streltsov slowly approached the platform. The eye continued to rotate, symbols on its surface pulsating with red light. Igor felt a strange attraction, as if the artifact was calling to him, recognizing the blood of the Streltsovs. Behind the glass partition, the transformed people sensed his approach. Their chanting grew louder. They turned their heads toward Igor. Their eyes glowed with a greenish light. Strange smiles appeared on their lips. Igor, Vera called anxiously. Be careful. I know what I'm doing, he replied, not taking his eyes off the artifact. I can feel it, and it can feel me. He extended his hand toward the sphere. His palm, with traces of cuts from which blood still seeped, hovered a few centimeters from the surface of the eye. Streltsov, Klimov said sharply, don't touch it. But it was too late. Igor touched the artifact, and the world around him changed. The hall, his comrades, the station, everything disappeared. Streltsov found himself in a strange space, an endless dark void filled with misty auroras and distant stars. But these stars were wrong, too large, too close, and arranged in unfamiliar constellations. But he was not alone. Before him stood a figure in an NKVD military uniform from the 30s, a young officer whose face was so similar to his own. Grandfather? Igor asked uncertainly. Grandson, Vasily Petrovich nodded, and his voice sounded strange, as if through a thickness of water. You've come after all. I waited so long. Where are we? Asked Streltsov, looking around. What is this place? The boundary. His grandfather replied. Between worlds. I've spent the last 87 years here, keeping the gates closed, not allowing them to pass. The ancients? Yes, Vasily Petrovich nodded. They are older than life itself on Earth. They were before us and will be after us, non-human entities from other dimensions, from the depths of space and time. Why do they want to enter our world? Food, his grandfather answered simply. Living, intelligent beings are a source of nourishment for them. But not physical, no. They feed on fear, pain, suffering, emotions that cause the strongest energy release. And you've been holding them back? Alone? Not quite alone. Vasily Petrovich pointed to his chest, where beneath his uniform the familiar medallion could be discerned. Shadow help me, and the blood of our lineage. It has special properties that allow control over the energy flow between worlds. But now the seal is weakening, said Igor. They're breaking through. Yes, his grandfather nodded sadly. I'm aging even here, at the boundary of time. My strength is diminishing, and the convergence approaches, the moment when all worlds come closest together. The ancients sense this. They're becoming stronger, more persistent. What must I do? Vasily Petrovich looked intently at his grandson. You have a choice, Igor. You can strengthen the seal using your blood, your power. Close the gates for some time longer. But this is a temporary solution. Sooner or later, the convergence will repeat, and everything will start anew. And the second option? You can free me, his grandfather said quietly. Take my place. Become the new guardian of the boundary, young, strong. This will give humanity more time. Igor frowned. But that's the same thing, a temporary solution, just a postponement. There is a third path. His grandfather looked somewhere into the darkness behind Igor. But it's dangerous and requires sacrifice. What kind? You can go deeper, Vasily Petrovich pointed into the infinite darkness. There, where the ancients dwell, and destroy their source of power, an artifact they call the Heart of the Abyss. It's the primary crystal that spawned all other eyes. If it's destroyed, the connection between worlds will be severed for a long time, perhaps forever. But no one has returned from there. His grandfather lowered his eyes. Even I, with all my power, with all Shadow's help, didn't risk going there. Too many ancients, too great their might in their native dimension. Streltsov pondered. A temporary solution, personal sacrifice, or mortal risk for everyone. How much time do I have to decide? Not much, Vasily Petrovich replied. Time flows differently here, but in your world the eye continues to activate. When the process is complete, the gates will open fully, and then nothing will be able to stop their invasion. And my friends, what will happen to them? If you strengthen the seal or take my place, they'll be able to return. Eventually they'll figure out what to do. If you decide to go to the heart, take them with you. You can't manage alone. Igor nodded. The decision ahead was difficult, but he already knew what he would choose. I need to go back, he said. Discuss everything with my comrades. Go. His grandfather placed a hand on his shoulder. But remember, time is short, and once you decide, touch the eye again. I'll be waiting. Streltsov closed his eyes, focusing on the real world, on his friends, on the mission. And when he opened them again, he was standing next to the platform in the bunker hall. His hand was still touching the artifact. Igor, Vera was shaking his shoulder. Are you all right? How long? He coughed, his voice hoarse. How long was I gone? About 5 seconds, Klimov replied. You touched the sphere and froze. We were getting worried. 5 seconds here, and an entire conversation there, at the boundary. Time truly flowed differently. I spoke with my grandfather, said Streltsov, stepping away from the platform. He's still there, keeping the gates closed, but his strength is running out. He briefly recounted everything he had learned from Vasily Petrovich, about the ancients, about their plans, about the 3 possible solutions. And what did you choose? Asked Solovyeva when he finished. Streltsov looked at his comrades, tired, exhausted, but still ready to fight, and he realized he couldn't decide for them. I propose we go all the way, he said. Find the heart of the abyss and destroy it. Close the portal not for decades, but forever. But this is our collective mission, and everyone must decide. They exchanged glances. Then Vera stepped forward and took Igor's hand. I'm with you, she said simply. To the end. Me too, Klimov nodded. Better to die in battle than wait for these creatures to break through and take over our world. Wherever you go, I go too, Solovyeva added. Behind the glass partition, the transformed station staff sensed their determination. The chanting grew louder, more aggressive. They began slamming against the glass, leaving bloody marks from broken hands and heads. They know, said Vera. They sense our resolve, and they're afraid. Good, Streltsov checked his pistol, ensuring a round was chambered. That means we have a chance. Ready? 3 nods in response. Then, he turned to the platform where the eye of the abyss hovered. It's time to finish what my grandfather started. The four operatives stood around the artifact, holding hands. Streltsov touched the sphere with his free hand, and the world around them changed again, dissolving and flowing into the now familiar dark void, filled with wrong stars and misty auroras, to where Vasily Petrovich Streltsov waited, to where their final battle was beginning, for humanity, for Earth, for the right to a future. Vasily Petrovich was waiting for them there. Seeing the four operatives, he nodded, as if he had expected precisely this decision. "You have only one chance," he said, "and little time. Follow me, I'll show you the way." Streltsov's grandfather led them through the boundary between worlds, toward what he called the depths of the abyss. The further they progressed, the more alien the surrounding reality became. Stars transformed into geometric patterns, space folded and unfolded in impossible ways. The laws of physics worked differently. "Here," Vasily Petrovich finally said, stopping before what could be called a rift in the fabric of reality. "Beyond this boundary begins their world, their dimension. I cannot go further, but you must. Find the heart of the abyss and destroy it." "How will we recognize it?" asked Streltsov. "You'll know," his grandfather replied. "It's the source of everything, the crystal that generates the ancients' reality. Your blood, Igor, is capable not only of activating portals, but also of closing them. Forever." "And how do we get back?" asked Solovyeva. Vasily Petrovich was silent for several seconds, then quietly said, "If you destroy the heart, the boundary between worlds will begin to collapse. You'll have very little time to find your way back. I'll try to keep this passage open as long as possible, but—" He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Their chances of returning were slim. "Then," Klimov said resolutely, "we'd better not waste time." Streltsov embraced his grandfather tightly, knowing that he might be seeing him for the last time. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." "Go, grandson." Vasily Petrovich placed his hand on Igor's shoulder. "Complete what I began 87 years ago." The four operatives stepped through the rift in reality. The sensation was like passing through liquid glass, viscous, resistant, but yielding to their determination. The world on the other side was impossible to describe in human words. Colors that didn't exist in their reality, sounds that couldn't be heard by normal hearing, space devoid of familiar dimensions. They moved, guided only by an inner sense, some instinct that led them to the center of this distorted world. And everywhere around them were the ancients, beings composed of impossible geometric forms, constantly changing their structure. Beings that seemed not to notice the humans who had penetrated their world, too alien, too different from anything the group had encountered before. "It's as if they don't see us," Vera whispered. "Or they see us but don't perceive us as a threat," replied Klimov. "What can a handful of humans do against an entire universe?" "We can find its weak point," Streltsov said firmly, "and strike at it." They continued moving, navigating distortions in space, areas where time accelerated or slowed, fields of weightlessness and zones of increased gravity. Only Streltsov's instincts helped them orient themselves, his blood seemingly sensing the direction to the source of the ancients' power. Finally, they reached the center of this warped reality. Before them lay something resembling a huge, pulsating crystal, floating in space. It radiated energy that spread in waves, forming the surrounding reality, nourishing the existence of the ancients. "The heart of the abyss," Igor exhaled, feeling his blood responding to the proximity of the source. The crystal was enormous, the size of a multi-story building, shining with all the colors of the spectrum and many others inaccessible to human vision. Its surface was covered with the same symbols they had seen on the eye of the abyss and other ancient artifacts. "How do we destroy it?" asked Solovyeva, looking at the pulsating crystal. Streltsov felt his wound, received when opening the bunker, begin to bleed again. Drops of blood, falling into the distorted space around the heart, caused a strange reaction, like short circuits in the fabric of reality. "My blood," he said, understanding what needed to be done. "It destroys their reality." "But we need more than a few drops," Klimov noted. "I know." Igor took out his knife and looked resolutely at his comrades. "I need to get inside the crystal, into the very center of the heart." "That's suicide," Vera said quietly. "Perhaps," Streltsov didn't argue. "But there's no other way." He took a step toward the pulsating crystal, but Vera stopped him, grabbing his arm. "Not you alone," she said firmly. "We're together." "It's my blood that can destroy it," Igor objected. "But we all need to reach the center." Klimov stood beside them. "I'm not sure you can withstand the power of this thing alone." Solovyeva silently nodded, joining their decision. "Together to the end," she said. Streltsov looked at his comrades and realized they were right. Alone, he had no chance. They had to complete this journey as they had begun it, together. "All right," he nodded, "on the count of 3. They joined hands, forming a chain, and Igor, standing at the front, took the first step toward the crystal's surface. It yielded like liquid, allowing them to immerse themselves inside. Within the heart of the abyss, reality broke down into its component parts. Time, space, matter. Everything lost its meaning. The operatives felt their bodies beginning to transform, adapting to this impossible environment. "Hold on," shouted Streltsov, feeling his blood interacting with the crystal, triggering a chain reaction of destruction. "Don't let go of each other's hands." They moved deeper and deeper toward the very center of the heart, to where something like a core pulsed, the source of all the ancients' energy. And with each step, Igor felt his blood reacting more strongly to the proximity of the source. Finally, they reached the center. Here, at the crystal's core, Streltsov took out his knife again, and without hesitation, deeply cut his palm. Blood gushed from the wound, but instead of falling, it hovered in the air, forming strange patterns that mirrored the ancient symbols, but with reverse meaning. Not creation, but destruction. "What's happening?" Solovyeva shouted, barely hearing her own voice through the increasing roar. "A reaction," Streltsov replied. "My blood is destroying their reality." Everything around them began to vibrate. The crystal pulsated more frequently and brightly, as if in agony. The ancients, who until now had paid no attention to the humans, now sensed the threat. Their presence in the crystal became more apparent. Strange forms, distortions, attempts to resist the destruction. "They're fighting back!" Klimov shouted, feeling something trying to break their chain. "Don't let go!" Vera squeezed her comrade's hands tighter. No matter what, Streltsov directed all his will, all his determination toward the crystal's core. His blood, levitating in weightlessness, moved toward the center, forming something like a seal, opposite to the one that kept the ancients in their dimension. And at the moment his blood made contact with the core of the heart of the abyss, an explosion occurred. Not a physical one, but something more fundamental, a collapse of reality. The crystal began to implode, pulling in the surrounding space, time, the very existence of this alien world. "Back!" Streltsov shouted, feeling them being pulled into the vortex of disintegrating reality. "We have to get out!" But the way back was already cut off. The crystal was crumbling, and with it the entire dimension of the ancients. They were trapped in the epicenter of an entire universe's collapse. In the last moment, when it seemed all hope was lost, Igor felt his grandfather's presence, not physical, but like an echo across the boundary between worlds. "Here." Vasily Petrovich's voice sounded distant but clear. "Follow my voice." They moved in the indicated direction, fighting against the resistance of the collapsing space. Ahead, light began to glimmer, the rift through which they had come, still being held open by the willpower of Streltsov's grandfather. "Hurry!" he shouted from beyond the boundary. "I can't hold the passage open for long." With a final effort, they rushed toward the rift. Vera and Solovova went through first. followed by Klimov. Streltsov, at the end of the chain, felt something grabbing his legs, trying to hold him in the disintegrating world of the ancients. "Grandfather!" he cried out, reaching his hand toward the rift. Vasily Petrovitch's hand appeared from the rift, grasping his grandson's wrist. With superhuman effort, he pulled Igor from the ancient's grip, and at that same moment, the passage collapsed, cutting off the dying dimension. They found themselves in the void between worlds, the place where Vasily Petrovitch had spent 87 years of his life. "You did it," he said, looking at the exhausted operatives. "The heart of the abyss is destroyed. The boundary is closed forever." "What now?" asked Igor, feeling immense fatigue. "Now you must return," his grandfather replied. "Your world is waiting for you." "And you?" Streltsov looked at his grandfather. "Can you come with us?" Vasily Petrovitch sadly shook his head. "My place is here," he said. "I've been part of this boundary for too long. I'm not entirely human anymore, but you must return and tell what happened." "How do we get home?" asked Vera. "Through the eye," Vasily Petrovitch answered. "It's still connected to your world, though it has lost its source of power. But hurry, the connection is weakening with each second." He made a gesture with his hand, and before them appeared an image of the hall and the bunker at Station North 16. There, on the platform, the eye of the abyss still hovered, but its glow had dimmed, the symbols on its surface barely glowing. "Go," said his grandfather. Streltsov embraced his grandfather one last time, feeling him slowly losing materiality, becoming part of the void between worlds. "Goodbye," Igor whispered, "and thank you." They stepped into the projection of the hall, and the world around them changed again. Now they stood around the eye of the abyss in the bunker of Station North 16. The artifact no longer levitated. It had fallen onto the platform, darkened, stripped of its power. Behind the glass partition, the transformed people lay on the floor, their bodies gradually returning to human form. The process had reversed. Without the energy of the heart of the abyss, the transformation could not be maintained. "Did we win?" Solovyeva asked uncertainly, looking at the fading artifact. "Yes," Streltsov nodded. "The heart of the abyss is destroyed. The portal is closed. The ancients can no longer enter our world." "And your grandfather?" Vera asked quietly. "He stayed there." Igor felt a lump rising in his throat. At the boundary between worlds, he said he could no longer return. They stood silently around the extinguished artifact, comprehending the magnitude of what had happened. They had closed the portal, saved the world from invasion, completed the mission that began 87 years ago. "We need to get out of here," Klimov finally said. "Report the results to Derzhavin." They returned to the surface. The polar night still enveloped the station, but now it seemed just like a normal night. Dark, cold, but natural. The strange greenish glow, the distortions of reality, all had disappeared. They were able to establish contact with headquarters immediately. With the destruction of the heart of the abyss, the strange interference blocking the signal had also ended. "Mission accomplished," Streltsov reported over the radio. "Portal closed, object neutralized, requesting evacuation." "Understood," Derzhavin's voice responded. "Helicopter will arrive in 6 hours. Full report upon arrival." They settled in the station's main building, waiting for evacuation. No one spoke about what they had just been through. Words seemed unnecessary. They simply sat together, feeling incredible fatigue and at the same time strange relief. Only Streltsov occasionally glanced toward the meteorological tower where the entrance to the bunker was located. He knew that his grandfather was still there, at the boundary between worlds, no longer alive but not dead either, a guardian whose sacrifice had saved humanity. This thought brought both pain and comfort. The helicopter arrived at dawn. By this time, the station staff, the former transformed, had begun to regain consciousness, remembering nothing of what had happened. Medics who arrived with the evacuation team began examining them, while military personnel secured the facility. Streltsov, Vera, Klimov, and Solovyeva boarded the helicopter, casting a final glance at Station North 16, the place where they had confronted forces beyond human understanding and won. "What now?" asked Vera as the helicopter rose into the air. "Now," Streltsov replied thoughtfully, "we have to tell Derzhavin what we've done, and what it means for the future." In his pocket lay his grandfather's medallion, which he had found next to the extinguished Eye of the Abyss. The last material trace of Vasily Petrovich Streltsov in this world. Igor clasped the medallion in his palm, feeling its warmth. He understood that although the portal was closed, although the immediate threat had passed, their struggle was not over. Derzhavin had mentioned 7 breakthrough points. 7 places where the boundary between worlds was especially thin. North 16 was only the first. Ahead lay new trials, new portals, new threats, and they had to be ready for them. The helicopter flew south, carrying them away from the Arctic station, from the site of their first real victory over the forces threatening humanity. And deep beneath the snows in the bunker of Station North 16, the Eye of the Abyss lay as a lifeless piece of obsidian, stripped of its power, its purpose. And somewhere at the boundary between worlds, in the void now cut off from both realities, Vasily Petrovich Streltsov dissolved into nothingness, satisfied that his long watch had finally ended. His grandson had completed the task he had begun. The boundary was sealed. The ancients would not pass. At least, not here. Not now.